I'm sure you're aware that alcohol markers perform better when used on paper made especially for markers. But what if we try on paper not intended for markers? Let's find out. Today we'll be testing a Maruman sketchbook from Japan, watercolor paper, a regular Canson sketchbook, and a super cheap sketchbook from the dollar store. So we're going to start with the Maruman paper. Maruman is a popular brand of sketchbooks from Japan. First, I can see that the colors come out darker than you would expect them to, and they also come out a bit more muddy, less saturated. The paper drinks a lot of ink. I feel like a lot is going into my paper. It actually feels quite wet when I touch it. But while it's still wet, you're able to add more layers and they will blend nicely. But only if you're using the same color. When you try to use a different marker, it doesn't blend. It just does not work. It just creates a stain that it's impossible to fix. But if you're fast enough, I feel like it creates a nice watercolor type of color, which I think is kind of nice. But you just have to be really quick about it. The paper has a bit of a texture that I feel might damage the tip of the brush type markers over time. So I wouldn't use it too often. With the fine tip, it does not come out very well. The colors are not applied very nicely when using the fine tip. But for the brush tip, it's not bad. It's not so bad. Here I tried using the colorless blender to try to spread the shadow a bit further, but it did not work. It did not work at all. It created a big blot of, I don't know, a big stain, and it was impossible to fix, so I just gave up. Overall, this paper was okay. Next is the Canson sketch paper. Similar to the Maruman paper, the colors come out darker, but not quite as desaturated as the Maruman paper. But similarly, it drinks up a lot of ink. The paper becomes quite wet, but it does have that same watercolor effect that can be nice if you're fast enough to make it work, because once it's dry, adding more layers will cause some streaking. This paper has a smooth texture. It does not have a strong texture, so it won't damage your tip quite as much. And the fine tip works okay, much better than it did on the previous one. However, it's difficult to make fine lines because since so much ink goes into the paper, your line will always come out much thicker than you intend to be. So I would only recommend it for bigger areas. Small details, it's pretty hard to get something consistent. The colors did blend, kind of. Not super well, but not poorly either. I was actually surprised. This paper is not too bad. Other than the fact that some streaking will occur, especially with pale colors like the lighter yellow there. But it's actually not so bad. Next we have the Strathmore watercolor paper. The first thing I noticed is that just like the previous two, the colors come out darker. But in this case, the saturation is actually good. I don't feel like the colors are all muddy. But there is some streaking happening, especially with the fine tip. You can clearly see the marks of the marker. And fine lines become bigger than you want them to because the paper just wants to drink all the water from your marker, so your lines just don't come out super clean, but I would say it's better than the previous two papers. But the biggest problem with this paper, I would say, is the texture. It has a strong texture that looks good when you're doing watercolor paintings, but for your markers, you'll just destroy the tip if you continue to use that paper. So I wouldn't really recommend it. But since it's so thick, it won't go through the paper. So that's at least one good thing about it. I mean, there's more than that. The colors do look good. But the paper texture and the fact that it drinks up all your ink will just damage your markers over time. But the end result isn't so bad. I saved the best for last. And by best, I mean the worst. This is the dollar store sketchbook paper. Even for just pencil, it's terrible. So for markers, it's awful. I can feel the paper dissolving as I color it. There's a texture. There's a texture to the paper that's not that strong, but it's still kind of my tip gets caught in it. And the fiber of the paper are just wasting away. It looks like there's a lot of streaking, but since the paper is absorbing all my ink, the streaking actually disappears, which I guess is a good thing, but it's just because the paper is so wet and so full of ink that there isn't space for streaking to occur. The colors, do they blend or do they not blend? I'd say it appears like they're blending, but they're not really. It's so wet that it just kind of all mixed together. But it's not true blending. I guess it doesn't look so bad, but any fine line that you try to make with the fine tip, for example, it just bleeds so much. It becomes all yucky. It's impossible to make fine details. It's just the line becomes so much bigger that there's no salvaging this. I mean, it could have been worse. It could have been worse. But I don't really recommend. I don't recommend dollar store paper. It's not good for anything. So in conclusion, do I recommend using the watercolor paper? No, because the colors do not blend. It drinks up all your ink, and the texture will damage your tip. Otherwise, it's a good quality paper, but not for markers. Do I recommend the Maruman paper? Yes, for sketches. You cannot blend colors. They just don't blend. But it does make a nice watercolor effect. The Canson sketchbook paper? Yes, same as the Maruman paper. For sketches, some colors will blend, not super well, but for sketches, sure. Do I recommend the dollar store paper? No, absolutely not. No, this is nothing good to say about it. Don't do this. Save your markers. So I hope that this video was useful to you. And I mean, obviously you should use marker paper, but if you don't, then these two will do the trick. All the tools that I use in this video you can find in the description, except for the dollar store paper, obviously. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for giving me a chance in this first video of mine. Bye!